Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker, and I ready to talk some trades. I think in a normal season we would have already probably talked about the trade deadline. Here we are. It feels like it's a little early, but it's really not.
It's about a month.
Trade deadline is very, very close.
Yeah.
It's what April
12th, I think.
12th. Okay, yeah. So we're recording this on March 11th. So we are pretty close, about a month out, and there are a lot of looming trades that could happen. I actually, from what I've been reading, a lot of trades will go down before this trade deadline because of quarantine rules, especially with Canada. I mean, any player that gets dealt to or from Canada, I think, is going to have to wait 2 weeks before they can actually play. So, I mean, that puts us at what, like March 28th, 29th-ish, probably is when guys are going to start getting moved, because teams aren't going to want to pay somebody at the very end of the season to go, all right, well, hey, these last two, we're going to miss 6 games. They're going to play what? 10 games with the team. I think they'd rather get that bulk of games and kind of get this done with before that deadline hits, because I think it's going to get a little wonky. Also, you never know, like, what happens if they decide to close a border or like something really weird happens. I think you want to do this sooner rather than later, and that is why we're going to do our trade deadline show sooner rather than later, as in right now. So top 10 trades that have the possibility of happening, that's where we're gonna go. Justin has the list, and we're gonna rock through this.
Yeah,
no Red Wings on your list?
A couple Red Wings.
Probably not gonna make any trades.
Yeah, Red Wings aren't making any deals, actually. You know what? I put 10 trades together that I think could possibly happen. Plus, I put together what I refer to as a bonus, because I think it's 99% likely to happen in the offseason. Okay. Oh. But it's a huge move that I think I would be comfortable making now if I was the GM of this team. And so we'll see what the people think. Okay, so are we just going to start off with like the biggest possible trade, and then we'll kind of whatever order you want.
Let's start with the biggest possible trades, because I think those are the ones that are fun to talk about. And then as we go, they'll be the lesser. I'm sure Mark Stahl appears on your list somewhere.
He does,
doesn't he? Yes, I knew it. I have not seen his list.
A couple Stahls are on this list.
Oh wow, we're all really stalling out. Okay, well let's go. Number one.
Let's do it. Okay. For me, it's Bobby Ryan leaving Detroit. I think that's the most likely trade to happen because teams are always looking for scoring, depth scoring, especially in that middle six. I think Bobby Ryan can definitely add some depth to any team, whether that's Colorado, Boston. But for me, Bobby Ryan, I honestly pegged him to go to Winnipeg. I think
that'd be a nice fit.
Yeah, with the absence of Laine gone, I think they could use a little bit of depth on the wing there, because not only does that, again, adding scoring is always fantastic for any team. But for me, that gives you the ability to move Paul Stastny down to your third-line center. Pierre-Luc Dubois, you can slot him into that number 2 spot if you want. But it gives you all these options in terms of, flexibility on the roster there. And so that top 9 can really shuffle up and deal. And to me, Bobby Ryan would probably cost Winnipeg a third round in maybe 2021 and then a 2022 fifth rounder. And they could probably get it done. Yeah,
and I wonder, would somebody be willing to give up a second-round pick for Bobby Ryan right now?
Depends if he gets hot, right? If he gets hot and gets going, I think there are teams, especially if he goes in close to, a couple weeks out of the deadline and he puts up, a few too many goals. Yeah, maybe a team that gets desperate, or maybe waits to the last minute, right? Steve Yzerman holding on to him as long as possible, and a team is just desperate for scoring, and hey, some guys will overpay.
Now, the other side of it is there are quite a few Red Wings players who could potentially get dealt. And Bobby Ryan has been a pretty good fit. And Bobby Ryan has also overcome some demons in his life. And not that, it's always good when you're in a situation that is good to stay in said situation instead of going somewhere new. And honestly, if there's any place that you could go and drink your life away, it would be Winnipeg.
I'll give you that.
Like some place that's boring, and especially, in Canada, these guys are going to have to go and lock themselves away. That's what they all have to do. And I wonder if that's just I got to imagine Steve Yzerman's going to be kind to him. he'll have more takers than just Winnipeg.
Sure.
But I wonder if that maybe is less of a possibility because of that. And I mean, it's not like I know him personally, or I just know,
No, and maybe
I know what you know.
Again, he coming from Ottawa, maybe Bobby Ryan's got a dislike, a distaste for maybe that Canada, that area in there, and so maybe.
But he is a free agent at the end of the
Yes.
year. It's not like he can't. I mean, he could go back to Detroit.
Yeah,
Nothing's
very well
stopping him from doing that either. I think a trade to Winnipeg does make a lot of sense. But you got to remember too, Detroit has to keep some people.
They got a lot of young guys.
To stay behind, and maybe if he is in talks with the Red Wings to say, hey, look, like obviously he's 13 points in 26 games. He's a 40-point guy, and that's pretty decent. I mean, that's generally a 40-point winger. You're making around, maybe the high end you're getting $4 million if you're a big goal scorer. Like he's got 6 goals in 26 games. I mean, so he's close to a 20-goal scorer. That's never really been. I guess he did have a 40-goal season one year, but I wonder if he's willing to take like 3 times 3. Does he just re-sign with the Wings? Because I think he'd be a great guy to have around.
I can't disagree with that.
Going, you know what? Yes, we could get a 3rd-round pick. Yes, we could get some lower-end picks, but we could keep him around at a good dollar amount. A, you need to have some bodies, and B, what better guy? A guy who's been through hell and has found his way back and has improved his game, but also improved his life. What better guy to have around a new group of young players?
Yeah, and I do think Bobby Ryan's going to get a lot of suitors this offseason, but really the question is going to be whether he wants to stick around for a rebuild or not. So
that's true. Well, he's doing it now. Okay, who's your next most likely player to be traded?
Okay, I've got the Nashville Predators moving Michael Granlund, and I honestly, the best fit for me when I was really diving into this, because I think there's a team out there that could really use a third-line guy, whether that's on the wing or can play center, because we know Michael Granlund can play both, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I actually, that's exactly where I went. I've heard his name tossed around for that as well.
Okay.
And I think that the Leafs have actually tried to acquire him before.
Yeah. I that's actually what I read and was just like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. That's perfect to me, and I think Granlund would be a good fit. He's still got some wheels on him, and he's, again, Wayne Simmons, I don't know what his situation is when he's coming back from injury. I don't think it was anything major, but again, guys like Jimmy VC just haven't really done it for me, and I would like to see a guy like Michael Granlund get an opportunity.
He has scored a few goals as of late.
That's true. But I think for Toronto to get this done, they could give a 21 5th-rounder and maybe another 3rd in a later draft.
Yeah,
I think that would be enough.
I think another team with some potential for Granlund is the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yes.
The Hurricanes have decent centers. You've got Stahl, you've got Trocheck who can play center, you have Aho who can play center. Like, you've got guys who can play center. Same with Granlund. I mean, Granlund can go down the middle, but he can also go play the wing. And I think you add Granlund to that mix of players, suddenly you have some incredible depth, especially come playoff time when we all know things can go awry pretty quick. Guys can get hurt. And if you find one of your centers out for any length of time, having Granlund in there to kind of shore up the holes, he can be plugged in wherever you want him to go. And he can kill penalties. He's a good defensive center, something that fits with Carolina's system.
And he wins faceoffs. But I actually have Carolina acquiring another forward, so we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, I can also see a Colorado Avalanche acquisition of a guy like Granlund.
Again, I've got another forward going to Colorado. Are you peeking at my list here?
No, I'm not, I swear. Okay, Granlund is number 2. Who do you have at number 3?
I have Mark Stahl moving, and to me, he's going to Colorado.
Okay,
we talked about it. Yeah, I think for a pair of 4th-round picks, you can get it done. Maybe a 3rd-rounder at best, but honestly, I think with Mark Stahl, if you actually look, it's funny. I can't remember who had the stat line up, but it was best goals against per 60 minutes at even strength. Mark Stahl and Stetcher from Detroit, that pairing, is in that top 10.
It's absolutely shocking.
It is very shocking, as bad as that team plays.
I did never expect to see Mark Stahl in the top 10 of anything but numbers that are going the other way.
Yeah, and whether or not that actually is his doing or maybe a combination of both guys, regardless, I think right now there's going to be a lot of teams that, obviously are always willing to pay out for depth defensemen come playoff time because injuries occur. And
Sure. And when you look at Colorado's defensive core, their third line pairing is kind of a jumble, right? So, you go beyond that, like a Ryan Graves and Devin Taves and Samuel Girard and Bowen Byram's hurt right now. That doesn't help. And then, of course, Cale Makar. That is, you need depth defensively to win in the playoffs. Like, there's no doubt about it. You can look back team after team that has won the Stanley Cup. It is players that come seemingly out of nowhere as seventh defensemen and are the heroes for some of these teams.
And Pittsburgh did it.
Yep. You look at Pittsburgh, who loses Chris Letang years ago, and they managed to win on the backs of basically Brian Dumoulin.
Right.
Nobody knew who Brian Dumoulin was before that 2016 run, and out comes Brian Dumoulin being a number one defenseman, and him and who was the guy that he went to the Leafs afterwards? Never made the playoffs like his whole career, and then he went and won the Cup, and then he played for the Leafs, and then went to the Ottawa Senators.
I don't know. I can't think about it.
We're going to find it.
Yeah, you look it up. But with Colorado, what stuck out to me is
Ron Hainsey.
Hainsey, okay, yeah, there you go. Good old Atlanta Thrasher.
Yes.
So when I looked at Colorado, right, I looked last year at the playoffs. Erik Johnson out. This team lacked defensive defensemen. And yes, they went out and they got Devin Taves in the offseason, which was an incredible move. Loved it. They re-signed him quickly, but I still would like to see one other guy on this back end that can play D really, really well. And to me, Mark Stahl can fit in there on a third pairing, seventh guy if you want to do that. In case, again, Erik Johnson is out and, not playing well. Devin Taves out. You got a guy who can play top minutes.
Cale Makar is out, and they're saying that it's going to be long term. So.
Yeah, again, guys like Bowen Byram, Samuel Girard, I think they've got enough guys that can play offensive style D, but to me, I'd like to see another guy who can really shut down on the back end.
Yes, I definitely agree. Okay, Mark Stahl, number 3. Let's go to number 4.
All right.
Fourth most likely player to be traded.
To me, it's Ryan Dzingel from the Ottawa Senators on an expiring contract.
Dzingel again.
Yes.
Now that would mean he was on Ottawa, dealt to Columbus, signed in Carolina, and then dealt back to Ottawa.
Yeah. But to me, again, we're talking Colorado, and that's where I think he goes. I think Colorado would be a great fit for him because when you look up and down this lineup, right, you've got obviously Landeskog, McKinnon, Rantanen, that top line. Brandon Saad's been all right. Kadri's been, wonderful for them. But beyond that, there's a lot of question marks. Guys, that are up and down all the time, maybe aren't performing. Brandon Saad, beginning of the season, looked like he was lost. He's kind of got back in with it, but, how long does that continue? But beyond that, I think their middle six is just really missing a guy who, can not only play center, but can play on the wings as well. And so I think Dzingel just fits that mold really well. He's got speed to burn, so he could move up if you want him to with McKinnon, and he could keep up. But if you want to move him down on that third line, he still produces.
Yeah, and a good fit there. And Ottawa, I do wonder, Ottawa trades a guy. You trade a guy who's a UFA, and then you go and you acquire him when he is a UFA. At this point, are you maybe in Ottawa, he's a guy that you want to keep around? Like perhaps the reason they were willing to deal for him was we regret losing this guy. So let's bring him back in. The trade was there. They had the ability to do it. Like Ryan Dzingel's stock has fallen, in my mind, since he was dealt to Columbus.
Okay.
Like he was in Ottawa. He was basically on the first line scoring. He looked like, hey, this is a 20-25 goal scorer. And okay, maybe if he's playing on the third line, he's only going to score 18 to 20, but we think that this guy can be really good. And lo and behold, he's maybe not as good as they were hoping. Like once he went to Columbus, he was mediocre, And
you can make the
obviously
argument that
Carolina felt the same way because they were willing to deal him as well. He just didn't fit their system at all.
Yeah, that's the thing to me. With Dzingel, you just got to find the right system for him.
And is that system in Ottawa? Now, granted, they do have a different head coach. DJ Smith, head coach there now. Well, he was the coach last year. And that's when Dzingel was dealt to. So.
Yeah.
No, Dzingel was dealt the year before.
Right. To Columbus.
So it is a new head coach for Ottawa.
Yeah, but as far as Ottawa is concerned, I mean, they're at this point. I mean, after watching their game last night against Edmonton, just they're lacking leadership and
they're just horrible.
Yeah, so just start selling everything off at this point.
Between Ottawa and Buffalo, my God is
right.
I can't see your list, but is there any players from the Buffalo Sabres on your list coming up soon?
I have two.
Because I'm itching to
I have two.
Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got one more that I think is more likely to happen, and then I've got two to go straight to Buffalo.
Beautiful.
Or maybe one, and then we'll go back to another team. Anyways, so number 5 for me, I've got Denny Savard from Columbus.
David Savard.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Denny Savard did play in the 80s.
Yes. David Savard.
Waterbug.
Yeah, I think David Savard moving from Columbus with maybe a late round 6th, 7th round pick, going to Pittsburgh, in my mind, for a pair of second rounders, I think is what it'll take.
Second round picks.
Yeah, he's going to be the most coveted defenseman going into this, this deadline. And I think being a right-handed guy, a guy who has been well known to shut it down defensively, there's going to be a lot of teams itching to get his, and especially at a low price contract that he has right now. A lot of teams can squeeze him in, and I think Pittsburgh, we've seen in the past, they're willing to, throw a couple extra picks. Now, granted, they do have a new GM in there now with Hextall, so maybe not, but I think Pittsburgh could really use him on defense because let's face it right now, they're not stopping the puck that well.
Right. And we do know that Pittsburgh is going to try and win with their current group. So you got to bring in some new faces, and any help for the Pittsburgh Penguins at this point, it would be crucial.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at that East Division, right, the top team, the Islanders, 57 goals against. When you go down to Pittsburgh, 77. That's a huge difference for a team that, they're going to
practically a goal per game almost.
Right. They're basically going to have to go through the Islanders. They're going to have to go through Boston, I feel like, at some point. And when you face these two juggernauts that can shut you down defensively, you have to have some defense to be able to compete in those 2-1, 1-0 games.
Right. And Pittsburgh is, they have been hot as of late, 3 wins in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've been playing really well as opposed to Boston, who has seemingly fallen off the map since we did our power rankings.
Right.
Boston's just taken a giant dump. But you got to think that the Penguins they're going to need some help here to even get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think they have to do that sooner rather than later because I agree with you. Pittsburgh, I picked them preseason to not make the playoffs. I'm still thinking that's going to be the case because this next team on my list that makes a move, I think, is going to probably jump them at some point and get in.
Okay. Let's go for it.
And that's the Philadelphia Flyers. I think they make a move for a guy by the name of Tyler Mott from Vancouver.
Okay.
Currently injured, but, this guy is a goal scorer. Not only is he red hot, he was red hot before he went out, but when you look at his hits per game, he's almost at nearly 5 hits per game while, scoring a bunch of goals.
5
and I
hits
think
per game.
Yeah, and I think for any team that likes to play a little rough, that would be, Philadelphia. They could use somebody to bang, to thrash, and outside of JVR who can throw the body, honestly. So to me, I think that's a really nice fit there. And not to mention, I think you could probably get away with maybe a 3rd round pick. Maybe a 4th and another late round.
Cheaper for a guy like Tyler Mott.
Right. For a guy you can plug in on your 3rd line and can score a few goals for you, I think that would just make perfect sense to me.
Yes. Now, when it comes to Vancouver, I guess we've got, 26 or so games left. They're behind 5 games. They've played 30 games, and Montreal's played 25. So at this point, back 5 points. You got to think over those 5 games, Montreal's going to pick up at least 4 points, and that puts them a solid 10 points out of a playoff spot. And so I think you're right. Vancouver almost has no shot. If this was an 82 game season, I wouldn't count them out. But in with a 56 game season, we're basically half done. I mean, they are more than halfway done in their season now, and it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for Vancouver. So, with that said, yes, a guy like Tyler Mott, obviously other players that could potentially get moved from Vancouver as well. I wonder, especially those teams in the Canadian divisions, if there's not a little bit of a like, okay, look, we're all here, we're all in Canada together, we can make this a lot easier on ourselves and just deal these guys amongst, like, maybe the price between two Canadian teams is a little cheaper than the price between a Canadian and an American team, because of the ease of staying in the same country, a little bit less complicated. Both teams, maybe like one team is willing to take a little less from, same in the United States. Like, is a team going to be like if it's a let's say the Leafs are competing with somebody over Mikael Granlund for Nashville, is Nashville going to be more likely to make a deal with an American team, or will the cost be higher for a Canadian team to come after somebody on an American team if another American team is bidding for it?
So the only thing I can think of when it comes to something like that, now I think, honestly, teams don't really care. Now I think, preferably, I think teams will try to, like the Canadian teams will try to pick guys from within their own division, because maybe they don't want to wait that 10 days that, you have to quarantine or whatever it is crossing the border.
It's one thing if it's a pick for a player, then you don't care. But if you're actually acquiring some prospect or a younger guy who's going to come in and play, which, I mean, hey, I'm certain that Taylor Hall's popping up in here, and Rickard Rakell, and there are some good players that we haven't mentioned yet who could still get dealt, will probably get dealt for more than just a pick, and that probably is where it becomes more of a, like, well, this guy, either we get this guy in 2 weeks or we get this guy now. And those, in a 56-game season, once we get to that point, we're talking 18 to 16 games left probably. Then you're really up against crunch time, and that could make the difference.
Sure. Now, I will say, as far as Tyler Mott's concerned, if there is a team maybe within the division he could potentially go to, I could see the Calgary Flames making a move, because they could really use some offense, somebody who can score, from a depth
Calgary
perspective.
Flames need pretty much everything.
Yes, they really do. Well, besides goaltending.
They
Jacob
can't score,
Markstrom has been
and
great.
They let a lot of goals in.
Well, I don't blame any of that on Markstrom. He's been playing great. It just that team is a hot mess right now. No pun intended.
Yeah. Okay, who do you got next?
All right, let's go to Buffalo.
Okay.
We talked about them. I said it at the beginning of the show, there's two stalls on my list, so let's talk about the second stall, and that is Eric Staal.
Okay, yeah.
I honestly think, and this is maybe the dreamer in me,
only 3 goals in 24 games.
Yeah, I think
definitely struggling, but who isn't in Buffalo?
Yeah, everybody.
Ryan O'Reilly. You don't have to look for, like, everyone's going to look at guys in Buffalo and go, yeah, but look at Ryan O'Reilly. He hated his life there. And then he went and he won a Conn Smythe with St.
Louis, yeah. Well, I mean, look at it now. I mean, so Jack Eichel's gone, so everybody's going to struggle on that team, even worse now.
Right.
He's been dishing the puck to everybody, basically. Any goals they scored is because he's dished it. So they're gonna be hurting. But anyways, dream scenario for me, Eric Staal. We talked about a team earlier that could use some depth scoring. That's the Carolina Hurricanes. Okay. I think if there's a place for him to go back
to Carolina.
Yes, play, because right now they've got Jordan Staal on that third line, and Jordan Staal is one of their best scorers. He's their best face-off guy, captain. I think it would be great to see Eric Staal on his wings, playing the brothers with Svechnikov on the other wing, who is on Jordan Stahl's left wing right now. But so you put Eric Staal on the other wing, you maybe or mix up the lines, whatever, doesn't matter. I think for a pair of third rounders, for a guy who's just a couple seasons removed from a 40-goal campaign, who can still put up goals, and he's going to provide leadership, depth, and he's going to bring just a certain charge and like charisma to that team. I think that is just going to, like when they had that whole run of a bunch of jerks, right? It's going to be that same kind of just energy that's going to come with Eric Staal. So to me, that would just be fantastic to see, and a team that could use it. And again, who knows where they're going to be next year, because they've got some free agents. They could lose some defensemen to the expansion draft to Seattle, because they're definitely not protecting all 7 guys. That's for damn sure. Goaltending's a question mark after this season, so why not send a couple third rounders over, get Eric Staal, and then make a push?
Okay. Eric Staal, anybody that can acquire him is going to be in a better place after
Absolutely.
The team that I go, all right, who desperately needs an infusion of something? The Florida Panthers had a great start. I think they're a really good team. I think the Florida Panthers are a playoff team in this division. I think it's almost a certainty that they'll make the playoffs. But ever since they traded Vince Trocheck, they have not had the same type of depth at center ice. And when they traded Vince Trocheck, it was pretty shocking actually, because they had Barkov and Trocheck, and I mean Trocheck had just come off of a 35 goals or right around 30 goal season, and they really haven't replaced him with.
I mean, they tried Alex Winberg. Right, he's been okay, but
right there are. I mean, okay. Have they tried to replace him? Yes, they have tried to replace him, but they haven't really brought in anybody who actually can replace him. And what better player, especially when you look up and down this roster, you bring in Patrick Hornqvist, and look how Hornqvist has played. He's played really well, and he fits in with that team because I think he's really one of the few veteran presences on that team. 21 points in 25 games. He got 10 goals. You look at the rest of the team, they actually, in terms of their forward group, he's the only player over the age of 27. So you bring in Eric Stahl, he'll anchor the third line, doesn't matter. He's going to come in and he's going to make an impact. And to me, the Florida Panthers need some kind of infusion of we believe in what's going on here. You had a great start. Now feed the boys. Give them something additional to play with, and it should be Eric Stahl.
I don't hate that move. Not one bit. And, I mean...
Or Ricard Raquel.
Yeah.
But I think there is a certain level of veteran leadership that's needed. Eric Stahl would be, I think, the oldest player on the Florida Panthers, if acquired. Yes, he would indeed be. The oldest players are Keith Yandle and Anton Strawman at 34 years of age, as of both of them. So you bring in Eric Stahl. I think you kind of give yourself somebody who's won a Stanley Cup. Trying to look. Obviously, Patrick Hornqvist has won a cup. You bring in those guys, and you do start to kind of build this championship mindset. Guys who know how to win. There is something to be said about it. I mean, you look at what the Leafs are doing. They're bringing in. They've brought in some players who have been around the block for a while. They know how to win. Granted, Joe Thornton or Jason Spezza have never won a cup, but they know how to.
They've been there.
They've been there. I mean, there's only so much an individual player can do, but you know what it's like to win rounds and advance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You know what it takes. You know the hard work that it takes. And most of these guys, forget a Stanley Cup, most of these guys have never won a round.
Yeah, that's very true. They've got the draft capital to do it, right? They've got all their picks, so they could make a move.
And they have the cap space. They've got
$14 million at the deadline.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're more than capable of doing that.
Yep.
Should we stick on Buffalo for a little while? Because Buffalo could really...
I'll go one more.
Okay,
one more in Buffalo.
To me, they are in a better position than Detroit because, Detroit has a lot of players they can deal. There are a lot of, C-level type of players. Buffalo, man, when you go Taylor Hall, Eric Stahl, Brandon Montour, there are some potential players that you can deal that you could get some significant assets back for.
Yeah. And my favorite trade rumor of all, Jack Eichel still on the block for the last 4 years.
Jack Eichel on the block because, I don't know if it's still true, but I remember the highest suicide rate for occupations was a dentist. And the highest suicide rates in any major city in the United States is Buffalo. So I think it was said that you don't want to be a dentist in Buffalo, but
yipes,
it's got to be a depressing place to live if that's the case.
I've visited there a couple times. It's a nice city, but those winters are rough. Those winters are rough there.
Yeah, a little bit of smog.
A little bit of ice.
That's always what I picture is smog. I don't know why.
No, when that wind hits from the lakes, it's all ice on the ground. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's no fun. Okay, so are we going Taylor Hall?
We're going Taylor Hall.
Brandon Montour?
Yes. Okay, so here's where I think Taylor Hall lands up, and I think it's going to cost the team a first-round pick.
Oh, I mean, what was the price for Taylor Hall when New Jersey dealt him to Arizona?
I think that was a little different because you got a guy who's a known Hart Trophy commodity, and I think he's kind of taken a step back. He hasn't been as productive. I mean, obviously,
two goals through 24 games is a joke.
But I do think
even with Jack Eichel out, Taylor Hall is supposed to be the line driver,
right?
And he has been nothing but.
He's been mediocre.
He's not been a line driver at all.
Yeah, and I do think while there are going to be teams that are still willing to pony up a first round for him, I think you're just going to have to find the right team. And there's always a team every year in and out at the trade deadline that's willing to deal, they always want to bring in that big name goal scorer, right? They did it with Rick Nash, Charlie Coyle, and it's going to be Boston Bruins.
I thought you were going to say the New York Rangers, because the New York Rangers brought in Rick Nash too.
Yeah, they did. I honestly, New York's a little bit too far removed, and they got Panarin back, so maybe we'll see where they go. But yeah, I think Boston is primed to bring in some more scoring, because you look up and down this lineup, right? We know the big three, Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasta. They're doing phenomenal. They're going to continue to produce. But when you get past that, I mean, you've got David Krejci, who's 19 games, 11 points, not a single goal yet, right? I mean, granted, you're not expecting this guy to score goals, but Charlie Coyle, a guy I expected to score goals, 8 points. I mean, it's okay, but I need a little bit more, and I think if you can put a guy like Taylor Hall on that second line with David Krejci or maybe even Charlie Coyle, I think you could get an explosion of points from this guy. And let's face it, I think Boston is in a place right now where they have to deal that first round, because Tuukka Rask may be gone, Halak may be gone after the season. We don't know what that situation is going to be like, and quite frankly, David Krejci is getting a little bit older. Bergeron's getting a little older. Krejci is a free agent. I think he honestly just sticks around. Maybe he takes a 2-year, $4 million per deal kind of thing, which would be fine. But, you know, again, I think they need to go all in on this season if they're serious about it. And getting a guy like Taylor Hall would be an all-in type move.
That is very true. There's one team Taylor Hall should go to. Now, I know giving up a first-round pick would be a lot to ask for a team that isn't like, all right, hey, we're a Stanley Cup contender. Like, let's go ahead and trade our first-round pick. But Taylor Hall, the reason he signed to Buffalo, it wasn't because he loved Buffalo. It's because
he wanted to play with Eichel.
He thought he could play with Eichel. He thought he'd pad his stats and get himself paid. And he figured, well, you know, I'm a free agent in the middle of COVID. Let me sign my 1-year deal, and next year things will be a little more stable, and I'll be able to get somebody who's willing to pay me, 7 times 7 or 7 times 8, whatever, what have you. Now, what team out there? How many teams can afford to pay Taylor Hall and to go, you know what? Let's fast forward where we're at. I think there's one team that could do so much more than anyone would expect. It is the Chicago Blackhawks.
Wow.
Chicago Blackhawks, I think all it would take is their first round pick. If they traded their first round pick, which potentially, it could, you lose in the first round, you're still talking about a top 20 pick maybe. The Chicago Blackhawks trade that first round pick. They've made quite a few first round picks that are paying off now. They've been able to build this kind of almost like patchwork this team back together to where they've been buzzing pretty well. Jonathan Toews is still not back. Is he going to come back at all this year?
I really don't know. I haven't heard anything about that.
I got to imagine that he's just it's Jonathan Toews. He's coming back. Look it up. Find out if he's coming back. But imagine if the Chicago Blackhawks were to acquire Taylor Hall and then able to convince him, like, would you be willing to take a 2 or 3 year deal at $7 million on Taylor Hall if you're Chicago?
Boy, Chicago's interesting. I like that for a deadline move, but maybe long term, I don't know.
But but it doesn't have to be long term. But that could be, hey, Chicago goes all of a sudden from a playoff bubble team to potentially, if Taylor Hall can take a line upon himself and he's given new life, potentially you have a Stanley Cup contender in Chicago again.
I mean, I will say this, right? Alex DeBrincat is looking phenomenal. Patty Kane is Patty Kane, so he's going to be good for many more years. But I think between those guys, if you can finally find somebody, i.e. maybe a Taylor Hall to play with Taves, now you can be...
Or Strome, or what, you know.
Yeah, now you can be super competitive for the next 3-4 years. Again, I'm still concerned about the goaltending long term. You know, is this year a fluke or not? But outside of that, I mean, you could really make some noise and still be competitive, especially, you know, I have no idea what the divisions are going to look like next year if they're going back. Because
if you had said at the beginning of the year, you said, all right, look, halfway through the season, Chicago will be firmly in a playoff spot. They're they're in a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Dallas is really the only team with 6 games in hand. They would have to win 5 of 6 just to tie them. So you're in pretty good position. You're in a good position right now as Chicago. If you said, hey, halfway through the season, you're going to be in a playoff spot and you're going to be points up on the next team, on a lot of teams, you're going to do that without Jonathan Taves, Andrew Shaw, Kirby Dach, Alex Nylander, and you're going to do it with Kevin Lankinen as your starting goaltender.
Yeah, I would have said you're high.
Things are going really well for them.
I mean, at this point, if you're Chicago, you got to really take a look and say, okay, are we going to be a contender or are we just going to continue this rebuild? Because, you know, you got to say, let's give these young guys experience, which is great.
But you just want to surround your young guys with good players.
Well, not only that, but you're wasting Patty Kane and, you know, Taves' last couple years with this franchise. So we'll see.
Yeah, the other team that really could look, it would be a very interesting acquisition. But the New York Islanders and Taylor Hall, you know, you have a team that is so good defensively that Taylor Hall actually played really well when he played in New Jersey under John Hines was the head coach. That was the year that he won the Hart Trophy, and he played really, really well under a system that was defensive, of course, but he was given opportunities to score. I wonder if he could go into a really tight system and succeed, because you think of the players that he'd be surrounded with in New York, with an Anders Lee and a Pajot, Cal Clutterbuck, these guys that can make room,
Barzell,
make a lot of room for Taylor Hall to give him the space to do what he needs to do. That could be a really interesting combination.
Yeah, my only concern for a team like the Islanders is they're up against
Not a
the
lot
cap.
Of cap space.
Yeah, so they've got to move money out, and right now it's, when you look at money going out, what's his face? Why can't I think of the name? Andrew Ladd, sorry, that's what it is. So you got to move Andrew Ladd, and they tried to do it last year with Zach Parise and Ladd, that swap that, you know, Parise actually waived his no-trade clause to go there.
Right.
That's a little bit more doubtful in my mind, but it would be interesting, for sure.
Yeah, they also, I mean, right now they do have Johnny Boychuk on LTIR, and I think that right now it's actually counting towards the cap. So that would leave you with some space, I think.
Maybe we'll see.
I wonder, you know, is there somebody in there that you could deal that would, you know, like a Leo Komarov? He's making $3 million a year. You kind of move things around. You kind of trickle things through. Taylor Hall, Buffalo Sabres have to eat half that deal. They might have to eat half that deal anyways.
Yeah,
and
that's
at
very
that
true.
point, it's really only like $750,000,
right?
Because, you know, you've already paid them
prorated, sure.
Yeah, so it's only through the end of the year. So I don't think that would be a really big deal for Buffalo. You might have to feed them an extra 3rd round pick or something. But to me, the New York Islanders, I mean, this is their time right now. Things are looking real good, but for a team that's really defensive with a lot of aging veterans, you got to go for this. Like, the Islanders have never actually gone for it. They just happen to win a couple rounds the last couple years and actually have become contenders of rounds. But I don't think they're Stanley Cup contenders. I really don't. I don't see this team winning the Cup.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Add Taylor Hall to this mix. Suddenly, this I think is the top.
Are you pitching
team
right now to? You want me to call up Barry Trotz and be like, "Hey, listen,
call up.
I got him on speed dial."
Garth Snow.
Let me get Mike Milbury on the phone.
Mike Milbury, he's got a lot of influence in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, who else you got on your list?
All right, I got a couple more.
Okay.
This one to your team here, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are going to go after a guy who is literally the best faceoff guy right now in the NHL if I remember correctly. But
we already have Jason Spezza. He's destroying it.
He's good. I'll give you that. He's been playing really well. But again, this is a guy who can play the wings. He's very, very good at penalty killing. That's Luke Glendening.
Yeah. If Mike Babcock was there, he would.
Oh, he'd be all over it. But I think
Glendening would have already been there.
Yes, but I still think this is a great fit for a team. But Toronto, again, being up against the cap, they're going to have to move some money back. So I think this is going to cost Toronto probably a third rounder. But you're also going to send over a Jimmy Vesey with it. So you're telling Detroit, hey, we'll bump up the fourth to a third if you take some salary back so we can make this happen.
Yeah. I don't know if the Leafs would be willing to give up a third-round pick for Luke Glendening.
Yeah, but if you have a guy who's
when there's Mikael Granlund out there.
Yeah.
Well, like Luke Glendening to me is the second prize in that group. Like if I'm looking Granlund or Glendening, I'm going after Granlund.
Well, sure.
And I'd rather pay a second-round pick for Granlund than a third-round pick for Glendening. Because I know that Granlund can play with really good players. Glendening can play with fourth-line players.
He can play with really good players, too.
Well, who's been good?
He can keep up.
He's played with over the last 4 years.
I'm not saying like he's going to produce, but he'll keep up. He'll keep up. Granted, if you're going after Glendening, you're not putting him on your first or second line. Let's just be clear about that. You might put him on your third or fourth line, with Spezza or maybe even Joe Thornton.
And to have a guy like that when guys go down with injury, that certainly can pay off as well. Who else you got?
All right, so this one is a little bit more of an interesting, I think, probably my least out of the 10 is my least plausible move. That is Elvis Merzlikins getting moved from the Columbus Blue Jackets, right? Getting moved to the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Not liking the Mike Smith experiment up there, eh?
I think Smith is great. I've always been a fan of his, but I don't think it's going to be sustainable.
That sounds like a conversation that that a boss has told me before. You know what? We think you're great, and we really appreciate what you've been able to do for us. All right, see ya.
You want some insurance, and not only that, but you need some future insurance as well. And I think for a guy like Merzlikins, who still has another year left, you can get this guy locked in to be your 1A, 1B with, Koskinen for at least a couple years, and then you can get Koskinen to the curb and let Merzlikins take over.
It's a lot of money to pay 3 goalies, though.
It is, absolutely. But, again, if I'm the Edmonton Oilers... They don't really have
any cap space either.
No, but you have to move out money, and so what I think it costs a team like, or the Oilers is probably a couple second-rounders, but you've got to send Alex Chason back with it. His money, I think, if you move him and just let him go, because he's playing fourth-line minutes right now, sure. You send him to Edmonton or to Columbus, I think Columbus would take on a little bit of a grinder, a guy who can maybe play that Josh Allen or Josh Anderson type role on their third line, whatever. They might like him there. I don't know, whatever. The bottom line is Edmonton needs a solid goaltender and somebody I think who can bring a little confidence, because right now you've got this team is humming right now. Granted, it was a 7-1 victory against Ottawa, but they're winning games right now. They're looking
3 in a row to the Leafs.
Well, that's the Leafs.
Who then went and lost 2 in a row to Vancouver. So
right,
there's no.
So you never know what you're going to get. But I think again, they've got some free agents that they've got to pay, like Yamamoto. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I think now is the time to strike. Get it done.
Yeah. And this Canadian division is really wide open. Like, you got to figure out how to beat the Leafs, probably. But if you can beat the Leafs in a 7-game series, you're probably going to make it to the conference finals.
Right. And then the other thing is, too, is you got to think longer term about it, too, because if you come in and Merzlikins plays really, really well, and you're like, great, I think we found our guy long term. Now you don't have to worry about Tyson Barrie, Adam Larson, like, do we have the money to keep them? Should we keep them? Should we wait and see if we can't find a goaltender? Now okay, well, maybe we can get rid of one of these guys.
Why does Columbus want to trade Merzlikins?
Because they're not going to keep both these guys around long term, and I think right now,
why
obviously
not? Lots of teams have 2 good goalies.
Yeah, but I think they're not going to pay the money to keep both these guys. I mean, they're not Vegas where they're going to get accidentally locked into something like that. So I think personally, they're going to make a move. They're going to send
difference
Verslickens
between
out.
$2.8 million and $7 million.
Yeah,
It's Korpisalo.
a little bit, but
do you want Korpisalo to be your starting goaltender?
yes, you do. If you're Columbus, I would choose him over Verslicken all day long.
Okay. I'm surprised you didn't mention Matthias Ekholm. Number
I don't
one
think
on
he
the
gets
TSN
moved.
trade board, but also a player who, I mean, you look at Nashville, they have to do something. Like, Nashville has been terrible.
I agree, but I don't think it's going to happen at the deadline. I think everything for them happens this offseason.
Except for Granlund.
Except for Granlund.
Maybe a Brad Richardson.
Yeah, maybe.
Brad Richardson, I think, is in the same ilk as Glendening. He's a guy who he'll play on your fourth line. He
I'll
can
take
move up to the
Glendening all
third
day,
line.
The question for me is the offseason for them because, yeah, you might want to try to move, maybe...
Pekka Rinne is a free agent.
Yeah, you've got that goaltending situation to figure out, right? But I think when you think about it long term, right, Nashville has to ask themselves when they're going into the expansion draft, are they going to basically keep, Dante Fabro, Ekholm, Yossi, and Ellis, or are they going to just keep three and just save some forwards? Now I think, maybe they might try to make a play and get...
Well, that's why Ekholm has to go.
Well,
that's why you're going to trade him. Because
if they decide, okay, well, we're just keeping these three guys, well, sure, yeah, but maybe you decide, okay, great, we're going to protect 4 defensemen and then just 4 forwards. So now we leave a guy like maybe a Matt Duchene or not Ryan Johansson, but maybe a Matt Duchene open to get plucked out, right? Maybe Seattle's like, cool, we'll take him off your hands. Maybe you throw them a third rounder to do it, or who knows?
I don't think... Do they have to protect Dante Fabro? Because isn't it first and second year players? You don't have to...
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Played 2 or less seasons, you don't have to protect?
I can't remember. But, I actually did read that Vegas is exempt from the expansion draft, which is a load of crap, in my opinion. But
yes.
That's a whole other story.
Get pillaged.
Yes.
Now... I see. To me, it's if you want to make a splash, you deal Ekholm now because he does have that extra year in his contract. So you really could get
you get more for it.
You definitely get a first round pick for him, a first and a prospect, maybe an additional pick. I mean, he's not. This isn't Erik Karlsson being dealt at the deadline. Matthias Ekholm is. He could play on your first pairing if you have another good defenseman. But he could also anchor a second pairing. But there are teams who are contenders who I think would gladly pay the price, especially at $375.
Anybody would pay for that.
Absolute steal for Matthias Ekholm. And there are teams who desperately need that defensive side. I mean, a lot of the teams in Canada, but you go like Washington or Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh even would be a great fit for Matthias Ekholm, where he'll actually make an impact instead of what do we talk like Mark Stahl or like Matthias Ekholm is the guy to spend your assets on. Guys who could move the needle and who will be absolutely fantastic for you. And also apparently Rickard Rakell on the block, having a really nice season. 19 points through 26 games for Anaheim. Could easily go in and slide in on your first or second line on pretty much any team that's in playoff contention. And maybe Rickard Rakell is the second fiddle to Taylor Hall. Like, are we going to see some of these big players moved before we see Taylor Hall moved? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Like, teams are going to want Hall, especially if Buffalo says, I'm willing to eat the 50%.
Well, then everybody's in play at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't be because you want that bidding war. And so, I mean, who would you rather have, Rickard Rakell or Taylor Hall? You're going to take Taylor Hall based on who he is, what he's been able to do in this league.
And the Hart Trophy.
Yeah. You had a bonus.
I did have a bonus, yes.
I need to know this bonus.
Yeah, so
Hopefully I didn't spoil it.
No. This is something that I think could potentially happen in the offseason, more likely than not. But I think it would be a great move for this team to do it now and get situated before the playoffs because I think they can make a legit push. They're sneaky becoming sleepers, and I think now people are starting to recognize that maybe they could be a threat, and that's the Minnesota Wild, right?
Yes.
The move I think they do is when you look at this team statistically. Worst power play in the league, 7.9%. Goals for per game, yeah, they're putting up 3 goals per game.
And you have a worse power play than the Detroit Red Wings?
Yeah. But they're sitting middle of the road in terms of goals per game, right? I think the power play could use an infusion of talent. They've got good goaltending right now between Talbot and Kokkonen. Or is that how you pronounce his name? I can't remember. But regardless.
Coke.
Yeah. The move for me is moving Matt Dumba. Okay. Hear this
intrigued.
out. To Detroit, who has been desperately seeking a right-handed defenseman.
A good defenseman, yes.
Yes. Good, right. Maurice Snyder coming in. You've got, Roenick, who's a serviceable, good number 3-4 defenseman. You move him to Detroit for Anthony Mantha, who Yzerman has said he is more than willing to deal somebody in his top 6. He's already come out and said that. The obvious name is Mantha, right? You move Mantha with Evgeny Svechnikov, who, again, another prospect who could potentially be a really good third-line scorer for Minnesota, who just hasn't been given the ice time in Detroit. Don't know why. It blows my mind. He came in one game this season, looked great, and then they put him back on the taxi squad. But you move him, and if you do it at the deadline, you throw in a Patrick Nemeth so they get somebody else on defense to fill that second-line spot by moving Dumba, and then you also throw in maybe a second-round pick with that.
Wow.
And I think you could get Matt Dumba.
Wow. Yeah, and Matt Dumba's about the only defenseman Minnesota has that doesn't have a no-move clause. That is a very, very fascinating deal. If you're Matt Dumba, you'd be pretty angry about it.
Right.
You're finally on a pretty good team. Yeah, that's a move I have not thought about.
He's the only one without a clause in his contract.
It's true. But he's also, and they kind of do need to.
So the bottom line is
you need to shake things up, though.
Well, no, you need. I think they need a scorer on the wings or potentially a second line center. But the problem is when you think long term in terms of the expansion draft,
your first round pick and go after any of the players that like a Rickard Rakell.
You absolutely could. But the problem is, I think when you look at the expansion, right, Dumba's going to have to get traded at some point because you have
saying they're not going to be. Well, they'll
want to protect
Ryan Suter unprotected.
No, they have to because he's got the no movement.
Yeah.
Same with Spurgeon. Same with Brodin. So you have to protect these guys.
And they have to protect Parise and Zuccarello.
Right. So you've got to protect these forwards. Then obviously
protect these garbage players
right.
that you're benching. Yes.
They want to protect Fiala. They're going to probably protect Joel Eriksson Ek. Kaprizov, I don't know where he qualifies in terms of that, but whether or not you have to protect him.
Because he's coming off of his first year, they won't have to protect him, but I'm not sure.
But again, I think it's going to kind of force their hands to where Dumba's got to get moved.
Yeah, well, they'll happily let Victor Rask walk.
Oh, sure, for sure.
He's the mistake of the year.
But that team's not going to pick him up.
Not like as a human being. Right. Not a mistake. It's not like his mom's walking around saying, the biggest mistake I ever made. Or anything.
Oh, goodness.
It's a mistake in a trade. Yeah. Probably shouldn't have dealt Nino Niederreiter for him. Okay. Well, that was a surprise.
So that's the big move.
You should go and try this move. Like go play NHL 21 and go and try and make that trade and see if Minnesota would accept it.
I could see it happening because they both have pretty good trade value in the game.
You got to make the trades like difficult.
Okay.
You can set the difficulty that is to trade. I usually set mine to easy so that
I set it on medium, but sometimes I get frustrated and then I'm like,
you go
this, and I go change it to medium.
Yeah.
I'm offering 4 first-round picks for Austin Matthews. Why aren't they taking this shit?
Yeah, I offered so many first-round picks for Lafreniere in the game. Because, of course, in the game, he's going to be incredible because, he's ranked as a franchise, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But not so much in real life. Okay. That's our show. Find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, this is like either the last or the second to last show that we're ever going to do from my house.
Yeah,
from this house.
From this house, yes.
Maybe my house, but from this house. So we're going to have to, get creative on locations. Do a little more Skype because I'm going to be further away.
Right, yeah.
I'm moving.
It's going to be tragic.
Livonia. So, but the good thing is in that house, I get a studio back. So,
that a boy.
Yeah. All right, we will be talking to you shortly. Enjoy the hockey and let us know what trades you think are coming down the pipeline. At OT Hockey Talk, we'll talk to you.